Hey besties, welcome back to the channel. Alright, get a drink. Because today we're getting into the moment we've all been waiting for. The day that Meri Brown finally exits Kody's life. And not quietly, not with a soft smile and a wishing you well. Number this time, she is not playing nice. And the big question? Who really wins when Meri finally concludes she is out Kody? With his ego still puffed up like a hot air balloon, or Meri, who is learning to breathe without asking permission. But before we dive into the scene in which she figuratively, and perhaps emotionally, slams the door, I must address something because my DMs have been full of craziness lately. And no, I am not calling out names. That is promoting all sorts of fabricated bullshit about how Kody sued Meri for defamation. Like, what? I literally laughed aloud. There is no sign of that anywhere. No filing, no court date, nothing, zero zip. It is made up, but people are buying it. And seriously, it is sort of crazy how fast this sort of thing gets around. It is like someone types Kody lawsuit into some random AI gadget, and all of a sudden half the fandom is convinced there is a court case going on in Flagstaff. There isn't. I checked. You can verify too. So here is your friendly reminder, besties. If you are looking at a thumbnail where Kody appears to be in a mugshot and a caption that shouts, "Breaking, Kody in court," it is not real. If it is AI faces that are just slightly melted, also not real, okay? Now that is out of the way. Let's discuss the actual drama. The one that has been coming for years. Because Meri Brown. Leaving isn't a breakup, it is a slow motion uprising that has been unfolding in our faces for more than a decade. And this time, it seems like she is not just leaving Kody, she is leaving for herself. And honestly, that's the part that gets me. Let's rewind for a second. Back to when Meri was still trying to keep the peace, back when every eye roll or sigh from Kody made her shrink just a little smaller. Remember those scenes where he'd dismiss her with that fake smile? The buddy tone. Ugh. If my blood pressure had a voice, it would scream. But this is what most don't get to witness. Meri's change wasn't overnight. It began the very moment she ceased seeking Kody's validation. And believe me, Kody felt that break before anyone else did. You can literally see it in his face in those later seasons. The confusion, the frustration, the "why aren't you trying harder for me?" Energy spoiler alert, Kody, she's tired. Tired of pretending that love means constant emotional babysitting. Tired of being the scapegoat whenever the family tension gets too heavy. Tired of holding on to hope that you'll turn back into that guy she fell for in Utah. Before the cameras, before the power trips, before everything turned into the Kody show. So today, besties, we're unpacking the story of how Meri finally decides enough is enough. And by the end of this hour, we're going to answer that question once and for all. When she walks away, who actually wins? Because spoiler, it is not the curly haired one with the collection of mirrors. Okay, deep breath, let's get into it. So, let's create the atmosphere. It is still mid-afternoon. The Arizona light is doing that brutal, overexposed thing where everything is too bright, too dry, and too real, which is sort of like their relationship. Meri's sitting across from Kody at one of those patio tables that always show up in the show, the ones that have seen more tears than iced tea. She's calm. He's fidgeting, and for the first time, she's not shrinking in the silence. You know that look Kody gets when he's about to say something profound. That's actually just rude in a polite tone. Yeah, that one. He leans in, fingers interlocked, and delivers to her the speech. The speech about how he doesn't feel safe with her emotionally. The same speech he has delivered a dozen times, but she is not fighting tears this time. She just sits there staring. And I swear, that instant right there. That is when it shifts. Because Meri isn't responding anymore. She is listening, not concurring, not arguing, simply intently acknowledging that this is it. There is nothing to repair anymore because she has already fixed someone who doesn't even care to be complete. She nods, breathes slowly, and utters something that makes him stand still. You've said this before, Kody. I've heard it, I've believed it, but I don't think I do anymore. And the expression on his face, priceless, because this is the lady he is accustomed to dictating the emotional pace. He plays irritatedly, she weeps. He gets chilly, she apologizes. But not this time, she is done now. Before we continue, I know some folks are going to say, But didn't Meri have her own mistakes? Didn't she do the whole catfish thing? Yeah, she did. She owned it. She bore that shame like it was her occupation. But here is what I believe that entire debacle
wasn't solely about being lonely, it was about being invisible. And what happens to somebody who spends years being invisible? They begin to crave evidence that they still exist. So when folks bring her for it, I just shake my head. Because if you watch the way that Kody handled her, the cold shoulders, the eye rolls, the "we don't have a marriage anymore," can you blame her for seeking validation anywhere it could be found? But let's be real, Kody never dropped that. He used it like a club. Whenever Meri attempted to rebuild even the smallest amount of dignity, he'd remind her. Not necessarily, but in those subtle passive-aggressive zings masquerading as honesty. I can't be married to someone who betrayed me. I don't feel the spark. You broke that trust. Interpretation, you bruised my ego, and I am never going to let you live it down. But the thing about Meri, she ultimately understood that no amount of guilt or apology was ever going to restore balance. Kody enjoyed being on top. He enjoyed being the victim in the tale, and that is when it hit her. If he is always going to be the victim, then she is always going to be the villain. And villains don't get cured, they just get blamed. So, at that moment on that patio when she finally uttered, "I don't think I believe it anymore," she wasn't rejecting just his words. She was rejecting the whole power structure. And for Kody, that is a nightmare. Because this man operates on control. He is the kind of man who mixes obedience with love. The moment someone drops the charade, his entire system collapses. Meri, she just flipped the off switch, and you can see it. Her stance changes, her voice changes, even her laugh. It is not bitter anymore, it is ease. Like she is finally breathing her own air again. Meanwhile, Kody's doing that nervous laugh thing he does when he is losing control. He attempts to change the subject, discuss logistics, discuss the land, discuss the family. Anything except what's happening right in front of him, that Meri's slipping through his fingers, and he can't stop it. But here's the kicker. She's not slipping away because she's weak. She's leaving because she's finally strong enough to walk away. And that's something he'll never understand. When word starts to spread through the Brown family that Meri's finally walking away, the reactions are complicated. This isn't just one breakup. This is a break in a system that has been unstable for years. Christine finds out first, likely over one of those phone calls that begin with, "Okay, don't freak out, but..." And she isn't surprised. You can see it. She has been there, she has seen that. And quite frankly, she has been waiting for this, Christine's response. Matter of fact pride. She doesn't rub it in. She just nods and says something like, "Good for her." It is about time that she stopped waiting for him to change because Christine knows. She understands that leaving Kody isn't merely about the dissolution of a marriage. It is about escaping an entire belief system that informs you that your value lies in keeping a man in check. Janelle, however, remains cool. She is pragmatic. She likely just blurts out, "I thought this was going to happen." But it is clear she is already mulling the repercussions, the family group chats, the strained future holidays, the drama that always ensues when Kody's ego takes a hit. And then there is Robyn. Oh, Robyn, if you've been watching long enough, you already know what happens next. Cue the tears, the shaky voice, I just don't understand why everyone keeps leaving him. Robyn's empathy somehow always circles back to Kody's feelings, like clockwork. And look, maybe she means well. Maybe in her mind, she's genuinely worried about the family breaking apart. But the thing is, when you're the last wife standing, every departure looks like a threat. Because if Meri is gone for good, Kody can't continue to blame the others. The issue ceases to be the wives who left and becomes the husband nobody could remain with. That is what frightens both of them. Simultaneously, the grown children. They've known this was inevitable for years. They adore their mom. But they've also seen their mom fight to maintain her dignity while being embarrassed on television. You can tell they're relieved. None of them probably texted her something like, "Mom, I'm proud of you, don't look back." And that's the thing, she doesn't. Not this time now, Kody. He's unraveling in slow motion. The man's got this way of turning every situation into a sermon about loyalty. But when it comes to accountability, suddenly it's everyone else's fault. He'll tell you, I did my best to make it work, but she was the one who gave up, conveniently overlooking the years of emotional abandonment that drove her there. And the family meeting. You know, they always have a family meeting. They're all sitting in the living room, the air so thick with tension you could cut it with one of those fancy knives he likely purchased for the ranch.
Kody's pacing, Robin's dabbing her eyes, and Janelle's trying not to roll hers. He says, Meri's making a huge mistake. She's letting bitterness guide her. And Christine, bless her heart, just sighs. No, Kody, she's choosing peace. That's the difference, and he doesn't see it. He is too caught up being offended that the women he used to rule over are now choosing themselves. Reality check. The minute one of the wives walks out, Kody loses a bit of his authority. Not only within the household, but in the story he has constructed about himself. The one where he is the provider, the leader, the center of gravity. Where Meri is out of that circle. She is not just leaving him behind, she is reclaiming her place in her own story, and the family senses that shift. Even the fans sense it, the vibe online shifts. People stop sympathizing with her and begin supporting her. Memes appear, hashtags trend, and everyone's like, finally, Meri. It is not that they want Kody to suffer, okay, perhaps a little bit, but it is that they want to see justice, the kind of quiet, emotional justice that comes from seeing someone who has been underestimated for decades finally speaks up. And the twist. Once Meri says goodbye, the family dynamic doesn't merely change, it splits down the middle. Everyone's on one side or the other, some opt for peace, some deny. And Kody he controls, because that is all he knows. When the dust settles, Kody does what Kody always does, he attempts to control the narrative. He gets in those private confession booths, leans forward, and assumes that self-pity looks like he has been wronged by everyone he ever attempted to love. He begins going on about how he is betrayed, how he gave everything to this family, and they gave nothing back. And I am sitting there like, sir, you gave speeches and silence, not emotional support. Here is the thing about image. It is only as strong as the people who believe in it. And when Meri gets up and leaves, that belief begins to erode. Slides who once side-eyed her for lingering too long are now coming to realize what she has been going through. They begin watching reruns of older episodes, piecing things together, seeing the little microaggressions and the incessant deflects. The internet does its thing. Receipts, edits, timelines, the whole shebang, in no time. Kody collapse begins trending. Every take where he speaks over one of the wives resurfacing. Every time he rolls his eyes as a woman is crying. Being sliced apart like a genuine crime scene. And Kody despises that. Because for years, he has been riding on this notion that he is the wronged patriarch, attempting to keep together a family that just refuses to respect him. That story only holds up if the women keep their mouths shut. Once they begin speaking up, or worse, walking away, the facade shatters. And Meri walking away, that is the biggest crack yet. She is not yelling, she is not sharing mysterious quotes, she is not attempting to pull him back. She is just finished. And that peaceful, silent departure is what stings the most. You ever notice how folks like Kody only truly freak out when you no longer react? They need attention to survive. The arguments, the psychodrama. But when you withhold it, when you just walk away, that is when they begin to spin out of control. So Kody begins attempting to rewrite history. Now he is telling us he saw it coming, and was emotionally divorced from Meri years ago. Like, no, Kody, you don't get to ghost someone emotionally for 10 years and then pretend like you foresaw their self-sufficiency. The guy's ego can't stand that she left him, not him her. And then there is the spin, you know it is on its way. The monologues regarding how polygamy just isn't what it used to be. And how modern women don't want to live by faith anymore. Translation, they quit allowing me to be in control. But here is what is crazy. His words don't have the same impact anymore because the audience has changed. They're not watching a man losing his family. They're watching a man who lost his handle. And in the meantime, Meri, she is radiant. She begins uploading pictures from vacations, launching her company, smiling without the tension in her face. You can tell, the peace. The kind that doesn't happen because you've solved it all, but because you've finally laid it down. Everything she posts nowadays, people inundate the comments with love. Proud of you, Meri. You deserve this. The glow up is real. And the irony, that attention, the admiration, the love, it is what she always hoped Kody would show her. She found it by leaving him. Kody does see, of course. He'll never say it, but you can tell. The way he mentions her in interviews, as if he is trying to prove he doesn't care, but can't seem to quit saying her name. That is not indifference. That is annoyance. That is loss. Old news, because at heart, I believe Kody knows something he'll never ever utter. Meri's happiness makes him appear bad. He can whine about betrayal, loyalty, faith, all he can. But that does not alter the reality that the lady whom he drove away is now prospering without him. And that kind of truth, you can't spin it. So while Kody's out here doing interviews about what went wrong, Meri's already living what's right. That's the start of his real downfall. Not the wives leaving, but the world finally seeing through the act. You know what's really wild? For years, Meri barely spoke above a whisper when it came to her real feelings. On camera, she'd sit there with that smile of politeness, picking her words carefully, afraid to trigger Kody or enrage the other wives. That was survival. Silence wasn't weakness there. It was strategy. She understood that if she got loud or aggressive, she'd be called dramatic or disobedient. So she learned to hold her tongue, to swallow her anger and pretend to accept. But when she finally does walk away, that silence is a tool. Because for the first time, Meri doesn't have to phrase everything through anyone else's comfort. No cameras controlling her story. No husband breaking down what she actually said. No co-wives walking around her feelings. Maybe just her, and let me tell you, the first time people actually heard her speak freely, really freely, it was like they saw a different person. There is this new confidence, this calm assuredness in her voice. She is not trying to convince anyone of anything anymore. That is what happens when you quit asking permission to be alive. She begins to share stories, not about Kody, but about herself, about finding out who she is beyond the first wife, about creating her business, traveling solo, reconnecting with friends she'd lost contact with. She discusses loneliness too, not self-pityingly, but honestly and nakedly. She confesses that it is difficult to begin anew, that even walking away from something poisonous is grief, and it is that which makes people relate to her once again, the authenticity. Because it is not performative, she is no longer pursuing a narrative. She is living one. And here is what actually slays. Her fans, the same ones who begged her to leave, are now supporting her like she is the underdog that finally escaped. Every time she posts a post about self-worth or peace, it receives thousands of likes. But most of all, you can see it in her. The glow, the demeanor, the way her eyes sparkle when she discusses her future. Meantime, Kody, still attempting to justify himself, still sidestepping, still seething. It is such a spectacle watching two individuals who used to revolve around one another and then just suddenly start revolving in a different direction. One ascending, one descending, and that is when you comprehend. This is not a mere breakup. It is an all-out role reversal. For years, Kody had the power, the narrative, the control, the authority. Meri was the one clinging, apologizing, waiting for crumbs of attention. Now she is the one in command of the narrative, and she is not wielding that power to get even or destroy him. She is just thriving. And that is the type of revenge that actually hurts. Because how do you combat a person who is done fighting? At some point in a podcast, she says something to the effect of, "You spend so many years trying to be what someone else needs, you forget who you are. And when you remember, it is like breathing for the first time." That is the line that becomes viral. Clipped, shared, manipulated into TikToks, stitched together with fans saying, This is what healing looks like. It's not just about her anymore. Undefined, it's about everyone who's ever been in that same position, stuck between loyalty and self-respect, waiting for someone who never changes. And Meri becomes a symbol of what it means to finally choose yourself. You know how ironic that is? Undefined Becca's for years. Kody called her selfish for wanting more time, more love, more effort. And now that she is dead, everyone's waking up to the fact she wasn't asking for too much. Undefined, she was simply asking the wrong person. This chapter of her story isn't one of bitterness. Undefined, it is one of rebuilding. Undefined quietly, undefined gracefully. And in doing so, she finds something Kody's pursued for years but never discovered: peace. When Meri finally closes the door on Kody, the ripple effect hits everyone. The Brown family, scattered, fractured, and emotionally bruised, starts reacting in their own ways. And those reactions say everything. Let's start with Janelle. She's the practical one, the steady presence who's always seen the writing on the wall long before anyone else admitted it. When she hears that Meri's officially done, she doesn't act shocked. She doesn't even bat an eye. She just nods and mutters something like, "Good for her. It was time." That is Janelle in a nutshell. Low drama, high awareness. She is not shocked because she has been there. She has survived Kody's emotional stonewalling and control. She knows exactly how much strength it takes to leave when you've been conditioned to stay behind the scenes. I think she respects Meri for doing what so few in their community ever do, walking away from a man who hides behind faith to keep control. Then there's Christine. Christine's reaction is different. It's emotional. She's proud. She's happy for Meri. But there's this layer of sadness too, because if we're being honest, Meri leaving probably reminds her of her own heartbreak. Christine's already made peace with her decision, but seeing Meri follow in her footsteps just confirms that the problem was never the women. It was Kody all along. In one interview, she actually tears up talking about Meri's strength. She says something like, "I know how hard it is to walk away when you've spent your whole life believing that loyalty means staying, no matter how bad it gets." And that right there, that's sisterhood. Not the kind TLC tries to sell, but the real kind. The kind that comes from shared pain and survival. Now, Robyn, oh Robyn. Her reaction is where the tension really kicks in, because the instant Meri gets up and walks away, Robyn has this realization. She is literally the last woman standing. The favorite wife crown doesn't seem quite so bright anymore when you are the sole survivor in the castle. You can catch the desperation on her face on interview days. She explains how she is heartbroken and confused. But you know that it is not solely sadness, it is fear. Fear of what this implies for her. Because Robyn's whole sense of self in that family has been constructed around being the faithful one, the one who still believes in the principle. But if all the other wives have departed, what does that leave her? And you can see that even she recognizes the truth in her heart. Kody's loyalty has always been for convenience, not commitment. The children's responses are another matter. All of them don't say much publicly, but some discreet posts say a lot. "Proud of you, Mom," here. "A new beginnings" quote there. They're not attempting to create drama. They're simply recognizing what all of us can see. Meri's finally liberated. And what is interesting is that the fans catch on to something that the show never quite depicted clearly. That although the dynamics between the wives were complicated, beneath it all was a thread of compassion. They all understood what it was like to be under the same control, the same expectations. And seeing one of them shatter that cycle, that is not betrayal, that is hope. In the meantime, Kody's spiraling. He begins doing these epic, meandering interviews about how the family has turned against him, how the wives never supported his vision. But the more he speaks, the more it becomes apparent that he is not grieving Meri. He is grieving the loss of his authority. He can't control the narrative anymore. The audience isn't buying the poor me act. The wives aren't covering for him. Even Robyn's trying to hold back frustration as she watches everything unravel. And for the first time, Kody looks small, not the big, loud, overconfident patriarch we've seen for 20 seasons. Just a man grasping that nothing that he can say or try to justify can repair the fact that he drove them all away. In a quiet moment when a producer wants to know if he regrets the way he treated Meri, there is this flash for a moment where he almost seems like he will say yes. But then he catches himself, stands up straight, and begins to prattle on about God's plan again. Deflection, as ever. But by this point, nobody's believing it. Not the fans, not the wives, not even Meri. Because once you've discovered your voice, you can't unhear it. And in the silence when she leaves, everyone in the family, even Kody, begins to understand what she was trying to tell them all along. That peace is more valuable than loyalty. When Meri walks away, it doesn't just alter the family, it alters the public discourse. For years, Kody's been the figurehead for sister wives, the man who said he was keeping a plural family together through faith, leadership, and love. But now that vision is shattering wide open, and people aren't holding back anymore. The same public who used to watch with fascination are now watching with outrage. The comment sections are overwhelmed, not with empathy, but with responsibility. Fans are going back through clips, creating compilations, and questioning aloud what many viewers have long kept to themselves. How did we ever think this guy was the victim? It begins small, TikToks, reaction clips, Reddit threads, then it snowballs. Each clip in which he cuts off a wife in mid-sentence, each time he preaches to them about obedience, while excusing himself, is turned into viral material. Samoni even compiles a timeline entitled, "The Downfall of Kody Brown." It begins with Season 1, big smiles, togetherness, vows, and concludes with Season 20, where he is alone, fuming, ranting about betrayal while everyone else transitions on. And the juxtaposition is merciless. You see the transition, the control cloaked as worry, the guilt, tripping cloaked as spirituality, the hubris seeping through every family meeting. It is like the whole internet woke up suddenly. And what hurts Kody most is that it is no longer coming from the outside. It is coming from the fans. Fans that used to support him, fans that actually believed he was trying to make an impossible lifestyle endure now. They're finished making excuses for him. Number Kody exposed begins trending on social media. Influencers dissect his contradictions in side videos. Ex-Destiny's Child fans candidly confess that they only watch now to watch him deal with the consequences. And you can sense the change of heart even from the editing done by TLC. The producers aren't covering for him anymore. They're going in on the drama, displaying longer shots of the side of the wives, displaying his tantrums uncensored. It is subtle, but it exists. TLC knows what the people want, and for once it is not Kody's side of the story. Even the narrator of the show seems to be over him. There is a chillier, more detached tone, as if finally the story is getting on without him. In the meantime, Kody is attempting some damage control. He begins doing interviews where he says the show is misleading, that editing makes him look bad, and that the women twist the truth. When you've been recorded for 20 years, though, there is only so much you can blame editing for. People can see him now, and you can tell it is gnawing at him, because men such as Kody live in admiration. They must be the focal point, the one to whom everyone turns, but then suddenly all the light is on Meri, Christine, and Janelle, and he is just a figure in the background. That is ego death. Him attempting to play the faith card once more, spouting about how God tests him through disobedience, how men are called to lead even when they're not understood. But those monologues don't land the same anymore. They ring hollow. Because when every woman who has ever loved you walks away, not in rebellion, but in exhaustion, perhaps it is not them, maybe it is you, and that is what the audience continues to say, over and over. They're done giving him grace. The internet becomes this giant reckoning space, a kind of public therapy session for people who've dealt with men like him. Controlling, self-righteous, manipulative. They see themselves in Meri's quiet suffering and Christine's brave exit, and for the first time, people aren't laughing with Kody. They're laughing at him. Clips of him flipping his hair and saying, "I'm the head of this family," become memes. People stitch it with captions like, "Head of what, exactly?" Even mainstream media starts covering it differently. Headlines read, "Kody Brown faces backlash as fans rally behind wives Meri's freedom," becomes sister wives' most powerful storyline. Yet the power dynamic has completely flipped. Kody used to think he could control his family's story. Now he is just a player in someone else's redemption story. And the twist, the man who once bragged that he needed 4 wives to be happy is now sadder than ever. And the entire world gets to witness it. Whenever Meri left, Kody figured he'd deal with it the way he always has, dismiss it, reinterpret it as her choice. And forget, he has done it before. When Christine walked away, he spun it. When Janelle pulled back, he labeled it a phase. But this time, it is different. Because behind closed doors, Kody's world doesn't just shrink. It echoes. The cameras are gone. The house is quiet. There is no one left to argue with, no one to guilt, trip into staying, no one to absorb the chaos he creates. Just silence. And for a man who feeds on control and contention, that silence is deafening. He expected to feel relief, freedom, perhaps. But what he experiences instead is absence of attention, of authority, of purpose. He begins calling Meri to wrap up property matters or unfinished business. But it is not about logistics. It is about attempting to feel relevant again. You can hear it in his voice, that combination of frustration and yearning. He needs her to respond, but she doesn't. She keeps it brief, courteous. At arm's length, she is not icy. She is just finished, and that drives him crazy. Because Kody's accustomed to having women cry, beg, bargain. That is his comfort zone, that emotional turmoil where he can control things. But when you totally disengage, when you no longer care if you get approval or not, you lose your power. And that is precisely what is occurring. He even attempts to employ Robin as an audience, the sole remaining person who still attempts to understand him. But even she is thinning out. The more she defends him in public, the greater the blowback. Her fans inundate her social media with being delusional and enabler. So even within his recent relationship, tension exists now. Loyalty is forced, affection appears staged. On one such occasion, producers are heard inquiring off camera if he has talked to Meri after she had left, and his entire behavior changes. He tries to laugh it off, saying, "No, I'm letting her have her space." But that smirk doesn't hide the truth. It's not her space that bothers him, it's her peace. Because he knows she found it without him. He even starts talking about her in weird ways. Not angry, not loving, just resentful. Like she broke some unspoken rule by leaving and thriving. He tells Robin things like, "Meri's changed, she's not the same person anymore." And Robin, trying to keep the peace, just nods. But inside, everyone knows what that means. She changed because she had to. Meanwhile, Meri's doing something Kody never expected. She's reclaiming everything he once made her doubt. Her voice, her identity, her value. She begins posting inspirational messages, going live with her fans, operating her business confidently. She even laughs again, that full, wide laugh you hadn't heard since season 1. And folks notice. The glow-up is airtight. The tabloids that highlighted her heartbreak now highlight her resurrection. Headlines such as "Meri Brown finds freedom after heartbreak" fans say Meri's stronger than ever without Kody, and Kody despises it. He detests seeing her name after those words. Freedom, stronger, happier, because he was the hero of his tale in his mind. The one who led his wives, who gave them order, who led with direction. But now he is coming to see that perhaps. And it might just be he was the villain in everyone else's tale. That is what happens when folks cease to play the parts you scripted for them. The script falls apart. So while Kody's at home, wrestling with his crumbling ego, Meri's out there rewriting her own story. One post, one smile, one step forward at a time. And that's the part he never planned for. He thought she'd leave and fade away quietly, maybe find some new distraction. Instead, she's doing what he never could, growing. If you'd told people 5 years ago that Meri Brown would become the most rooted, self-assured person in the entire Sister Wives universe, no one would have believed it. She was the sad woman in the background back then, waiting, loyal, half-seeable. But here is the thing about quiet people, they take it all in. And when they do speak, it resonates differently. On the day Meri stepped away from All Saints, fans didn't move on. They mobilized, they began following her lives, her business posts, her inspirational messages. Suddenly, she was no longer the wife who got catfished, or the one Kody emotionally abandoned. She was Meri Brown, entrepreneur, survivor, and embodiment of self-respect. And that change wasn't a coincidence. It had been years in the making. Following the split, viewers started sharing how they'd judged her wrong. They'd spent seasons rolling at her tears or her hesitation. Now they were apologizing online, posting comments such as, "We didn't realize what she was going through. She wasn't a weakling, she was stuck. Meri never publicly attacked anyone, not even Kody. She didn't have to. She just kept showing up online at events, and in every little moment that said, 'I'm still here.' And that consistency turned her into something even bigger than a reality television figure. She became relatable. Everyone's known a Meri, someone who stayed too long in something that no longer loved them back. So when she started posting about reclaiming joy and trusting yourself again, it hit a nerve. Her fans posted those clips everywhere. Later, there was one moment that really went viral, and that was a point during a live performance where she said, in a calm but adamant tone, "You can't make someone value you. You can only value yourself enough to leave." That one line got quoted on Instagram accounts, TikToks, podcasts, even non-fans were posting it. It became her de facto slogan. And it wasn't performative empowerment either. You could see it was from a place of actual exhaustion and actual healing. There was a woman behind that message who had cried enough, waited enough, and came to understand that peace is more appealing than hope when hope keeps injuring you. TLC producers, realizing the change, began to present her differently as well. In the new footage, Meri isn't the tearful, reluctant wife anymore. She is sure, solid, smiling like a person who sleeps all through the night at last, and fans pick up on all the details. The lighter quality in her voice, the slumped shoulders, the obvious pleasure when she speaks of what is to come rather than what went by. Even her company, which previously was frowned upon by fans, is booming today, due to the emotional connection she established with her audience. They're not only purchasing her products, they're purchasing into her story, her redemption. In interviews, she never cheap-shots Kody. She doesn't need to drag him. Her silence says enough. That quiet dignity becomes her armor. And while Kody's giving defensive interviews and trying to correct the record, Meri's already won the narrative just by existing peacefully. The public loves a redemption arc. But what makes Meri so powerful is that she didn't chase it. She simply stopped fleeing from herself. It is not common on reality television. No yelling, no revenge scheme, no over-top sit-down argument, only change. And change, particularly after years of being held down, appears radical. By the time season 21 begins filming, things are entirely different around Meri. Audiences aren't wondering, why doesn't she just leave? Anymore, they're wondering, what is she going to do next? That transformation from sympathy to respect is what real redemption really is. Because Meri didn't have to kill anyone else in order to reclaim herself. She just stepped out of the frame where she'd been minimized, and suddenly everyone could see her clearly. Kody's still trying to make his point. Meri's already made hers. If there's one thing Kody Brown never thought he'd face, it's being alone. For decades, he's built his entire identity around being the man with 4 wives, a house full of kids, and a camera crew documenting his big picture vision. He loved that sense of control. The meetings, the plans, the speeches. He wasn't only a husband, he was a leader, a representative of something greater than himself. Now, though, the big picture's fuzzy. Christine is gone. Janelle departed. Meri is free. And Robin, she is still there, but the relationship isn't partnership anymore. It is damage control. For the first time in his life, Kody's world is quiet, and quiet doesn't suit him. The house that once hummed with arguments and chaos now feels like an abandoned set. No one's calling out his name. No one's seeking his advice. The phones aren't ringing with producers inquiring about family scenes. He is just present. And that is when loneliness gets him, not the skin, deep kind, but the terrible kind that seeps in at night when there's nothing else to keep him occupied. He begins pacing, reliving old fights in his head, recreating history so he is the victim. I tried to lead them, he reminds himself. They simply did not want structure, but that narrative doesn't stand when there is nobody there to share it with. Robin attempts to console him. Naturally, she listens. She nods. She says all the things she is supposed to say, but even she is exhausted. You can see it. She is not radiant like she once was. She is depleted, treading carefully to placate his anger. Because when you've based your existence on control, and the controlled folks depart, what is there? Only the control. Because Kody speaks in silence, to cameras, to Robin, to anyone who will hear. He lectures about loyalty, betrayal, trust. He employs terms such as obedience and covenant as if they can conceal the plain fact. He drove everybody away. And the worst part, he doesn't understand even now. He complains of missing his family unit, but he doesn't miss the people. He misses the power structure. He misses being needed. In one scene that fans can't stop discussing, Kody admits he doesn't know how to be in a relationship where I'm not the one leading. That's not self-awareness. That's a confession. Because love isn't leadership, it's partnership. And that's the lesson Kody never learned. He thought his wives existed to validate him, to support his idea of family. But now that he has been stripped of that framework, he is left with himself, and that is someone he doesn't know how to be around. You can tell it is getting into him because he begins overcompensating in interviews. He laughs too loudly, speaks too much, and claims he is fine. But the body tells a different tale, the slumped shoulders, the fidgeting hands, the deep sighs between words. He is adrift without the turmoil. And when he observes Meri thriving, Janelle smiling, Christine engaged and content, it sears. Not because he desires them back, but because they showed him something he is afraid to acknowledge. They never were the issue. They simply stopped believing in his definition of love. Kody begins to go on these convoluted tangents about betrayal, but you can tell that at the core he knows the truth. Undefended, no one betrayed him. He betrays himself by believing love is something you can control like a business. And when he does take a good look around, there is no audience anymore. No wives. No kids stopping by, no body. That is when the gravity of it strikes. This isn't a phase. Undefined, this is his life. Now he is what he once pitied in other men. Alone, bitter, hanging on to a past nobody else wants to relive. And the most merciless part, the world kept spinning without him. Undefined, the show still airs, but now it's about healing, not hierarchy. Undefined aren't watching to see his speeches. They're watching to see the women he underestimated finally live their own lives. Kody used to say, "I'm the head of this family." Now there's no family left to lead, and that's not karma. Undefined, that's consequence. If you've also seen Meri Brown over the years, you realize that she is not the same woman anymore. She had a time when her entire identity was centered around being Kody's first wife. What an honor. It brought her prestige even though it didn't bring her happiness. For years, she smiled to hide pain. She tried to make it work and told herself loyalty was love. But when you walk so long on eggshells, you lose track of what solid feels like. And now, Meri finally discovered it. Since she walked away, there is a quiet strength about her. It's not loud or performative. It's the kind that comes from surviving something heavy and realizing you're still standing. Her business, her friendships, her independence, all of it looks different now because she's no longer living to prove her worth to someone who never saw it. She laughs more easily. She travels. She talks openly about rediscovering her confidence. You can see there is still a piece of heartbreak there, but it is not holding her back anymore. It is fuel. In a recent clip, Meri uttered something that landed hard. "I think for a long time I kept waiting for permission to live my own life. Now I realize I didn't need it." That is it right there, the shift. She is not seeking validation anymore. She is creating her own happiness, one that does not involve anyone else's permission. Even her dynamic with the other wives has shifted. There is less tension, fewer uneasy silences when she speaks. When she discusses Christine or Janelle nowadays, it is not through clenched teeth, it is with respect. They all burn through the same fire, only differently. It is ironic to consider that the woman who held on to the notion of plural marriage is now the one most content alone. And that is what makes her journey so powerful. She didn't only leave Kody, she left behind the piece of herself that felt the need to be chosen. She is choosing herself now. On her Instagram, you can see the difference. Her status updates aren't cryptic and defensive anymore. They're playful. There is humor. There is pride. She speaks of healing and self-worth as though she has experienced it, not simply studied about it. And the fans notice each time she posts something new. The comments roll in with solidarity. This is the Meri we always knew was there. "You look so free, keep glowing, girl." It is as if the audience has been waiting to be a fan of this version of her all along. The version that doesn't apologize for being. And actually, it is kind of refreshing. Meri's narrative has shifted from one of rection to one of reclamation. She is no longer defined by what Kody did not provide her anymore. She is defined by what she provided herself when she finally let go of asking for his love. That is what makes her journey speak. It is not revenge, it is release. because when she ultimately left, she didn't slam the door. She simply shut it quietly and turned the key outside. And now, with the same quiet strength, she is opening new ones, gates leading to things such as laughter, peace, purpose. She is no longer the wife on the sidelines waiting for the husband to get his act together. She's the woman who came around for herself. And when you look at her now, calm, grounded, unapologetic, you can't help but think, this is what freedom looks like. She may not have won in Kody's eyes, but in every other way she absolutely did. By the time it all came to an end, there wasn't some explosive moment, no shouting match or thrown ring. It concluded as things tend to do in life, quietly. Meri didn't cause a scene, she didn't pen a tale. She just stopped waiting for something that was never going to happen. And within that quiet she emerged victorious, because this entire tale, Kody Brown versus Meri Brown, was never actually about who was louder in an argument or who had the better point. It was about who grew up and who didn't. Kody continues to discuss loyalty and obedience, still blaming everyone except himself, still believing leadership is control. But his words no longer ring, they ring hollow now, empty, defensive, small. Meri, by contrast, quit discussing her power and simply began living it. Her proof that true victory is not achieved through revenge or validation. It is the result of finally being finished. Because when she walked away, she didn't just leave her husband behind. She left behind decades of diminishment. She left behind the version of herself that thought love had to hurt in order to exist. And once she entered her own life, all else changed. She is smiling again. Running her companies, exploring the world, laughing with humans who actually show up for her. She is not doing peace for the cameras anymore. She really does have it. In the meantime, Kody's still grappling with the devastation he left behind. You can see it in interviews, in his demeanor. He wants to appear unfazed, but it is there, the bitterness, the regret he'll never confess. Because in his heart, he knows this isn't what leadership is. It is what loneliness looks like, and that is the contrast that makes the end of this story so impactful. Meri walked away for freedom. Kody remained to maintain control. She created something new. He is still holding on to something broken. And in the still moments when the cameras no longer roll and the lights dim, you can't help but wonder if he finally does get it. That love isn't about owning. That control isn't the same as connection. That the wives he spent all those years trying to control just wanted to be met halfway. But knowing that now doesn't alter the reality that it is too late. The women have moved on, stronger, clearer, and more peaceful than ever. The audience, now bifurcated, now understands the truth in what it is. This was not the tale of one man guiding a family. It was the tale of women learning to guide themselves. And Meri, she is the evidence that quiet wins can be the loudest form of victory. Because when she finally walked away, she didn't just break up a marriage, she broke a cycle. No more waiting, no more apologies, no more folding herself up to fit someone else's comfort. Just Meri whole, steady, and free. And that is the part the cameras can't truly catch. The peace you get when you quit trying to win and begin trying to heal. So if we're keeping score, Kody lost control. Meri found herself. And that is not even a contest. That is growth. That is the real ending. That is who won.